Hello, my name is Denver Clark, founder of Embodied Health, and today we'll be exploring a practice for pelvic floor support. Your pelvic floor sits at the base of the bowl of your pelvis, sort of like a hammock. And if you consider your pelvis to be this triangle of the front of your pubic bone right here and your sitting bones at the back, we have our pelvic floor muscles sort of spreading across that triangle from front to back, side to side, back to front. So we're going to do a few exercises today that help us really connect with the floor of the pelvis and engage that part of the body. And the benefit of that is that when we have a more balanced pelvic floor function with the subtle, more articulate muscles at the base of the pelvis, we have improved balance capabilities walking around in our day-to-day life. All the muscles of our pelvis, from the center of the pelvic floor, the muscles that wrap around the hips, from the back to the front, the adductors that pull the thighs together, and the abductors that pull the thighs apart, are all connected in this community of synchronicity in the pelvis. And so bringing all these muscles together in this practice will help, number one, improve our balance, number two, improve our pelvic floor function, which is great for urinary continence, for support of your reproductive organs, and for greater overall health, because this is in fact the floor of the house of our body, and all the other organs stem from the floor here, are sitting right on top of the pelvic floor. Not to mention the angle of the pelvis and the spine sitting in the pelvis. So pelvic floor health is also connected to back health, shoulder health, neck health, etc. When you're ready, we're going to find our mat, and we're going to get a blanket or a towel, something that you can roll up into sort of a tube-like or bolster-like shape, and then 1 to 2 yoga blocks can be really helpful as well. Go ahead and gather those things, and then we'll get started. First, we're going to begin by rolling up our blanket. Now, depending on what's happening in your pelvic floor, you may find that you need a little less support than I'm using here. This is certainly not something you want to do if you're recovering from any sort of surgery or injury to the floor of the pelvis in general. But this is one of the ways that I like to share with my students how to access those subtle articulate muscles in the floor of the pelvis. We're aware of our glutes and some of our larger hip muscles like our psoas major, but sometimes we can over-recruit those large muscles and not really understand how to turn on these muscles. One example is when we're teaching Mula Bandha in the yoga practice. This is a really subtle engagement of the muscles of the floor of the pelvis, but how do we feel that? It's not really a Kegel, it's not really a squeezing or a tensing of those large muscles. It's something a lot more subtle. So I like to give a reference point to connect with those muscles so that we're aware of them when we go and access them later. We're going to take our blanket and start to roll it up. You can make this roll smaller or larger. It's going to be in kind of an interesting place. We're going to place it on the mat lengthwise like so, and have a seat on it so it's right between your sitting bones, right in the area of your perineum. You can sit cross-legged. I like to sit in butterfly pose, right? Baddha Konasana, bound angle. And so what we've got is the blanket roll is pushing up against the perineum. Feels kind of weird. We're kind of teetering on top of it here. And we can feel that connection with the blanket and the floor of the pelvis. So it's not going to be the most comfortable thing in the world, but it's going to bring our awareness to those muscles at the bowl of the pelvis. And then become aware again of that triangle here, that shape that you've got between your pubic bone at the front and your sitting bones at the back. We want the pelvis in a balanced position, upright, nice and tall through the spine. And as you inhale, become aware of the fact that when your lungs expand, they fill with air and they push your respiratory diaphragm, which is about here at the base of your rib cage, down. And when that happens, this skeletal muscle of the respiratory diaphragm pushes into the contents of your belly, stomach, all of these organs, right? When those organs get pushed down, the floor of your pelvis has a natural reaction where it too relaxes. So your pelvic floor relaxes on the inhale. These two diaphragms move together in synchronicity. When you exhale, the same thing happens naturally in your body, right? Your respiratory diaphragm springs back up like a little jellyfish, and your pelvic floor lifts naturally too. So we're going to use this tool to kind of emphasize that movement. So on the inhale, I like to use my hands to kind of take a visual for what this feels like. But on the inhale, we're going to feel the breath come in and down, respiratory diaphragm descends, pelvic floor relaxes, and imagine your sitting bones, that triangle, kind of spreading apart and the floor of your pelvis pushing down into that blanket roll. And then as you exhale, we're going to pull in and up. And don't squeeze your glutes. Just imagine this subtle lifting right from the center of your perineum, right from the middle, in and up. Abdominals are going to engage too. So you're going to feel kind of this Mula Bandha sensation too. This lifting of the abdomen is part of this. Inhale, relax, let the sitting bones spread. Exhale, pull in and up off of the blanket. And it's not really a large gross motor movement. It's much more subtle. So just feel as if you could lift off of the blanket here on the exhale. Inhale, down and out. Exhale, in and up. Good. A few more of these just to connect with the breath. And using the blanket as a tool to really feel the pelvic floor engage and subtly lift away from the blanket, as if you could pull it right up off of that blanket. And this is an action we're going to be building layers on top of with the rest of our movements in our practice today. Inhale, down and out, spread the sitting bones. Exhale, in and up. Contracting the pelvic floor. Inhale, down and out. Respiratory diaphragm, pelvic floor relaxes. Exhale, up and out through the crown of the head, lifting up. 2 more. And if you want to do the arms too, I find this does kind of help with the visualization of what's going on, because these are so subtle muscles, really hard to kind of start to access the first couple times. Beautiful. And then when you're ready, we're going to take this blanket out, and I invite you to really remember that sensation of the blanket in that area, right? I know it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but we're going to kind of sit, again, you can sit in your Baddha Konasana, cross your legs, make sure your pelvis is upright, you're not tilted backward, and see if you can connect with that same. Again, inhale, relax, exhale, right? We don't want to be forceful with it. We don't want to over-recruit these muscles. Anytime we over-recruit muscles, any place of our body, we can tire them out, we can cause disharmony. So we don't want that. This is really subtle. And then what we can do is we can kind of emphasize this with our legs extended, right? So now we're going to use our thighs as part of this. So as you inhale, internally rotate the thigh, and imagine that that's helping you to kind of exhale, pulling the sitting bones in and up. And the first few times you might feel your glutes kind of large gross motor movement first. Inhale. Spread, relax. You may even feel it tilting forward a little bit on your pelvis, and then exhale. Good. And now try to do the same thing, internally and externally rotate, but don't squeeze your glutes, so it's much more subtle. Exhale, externally rotate, lift up from the pelvic floor. Try to pull your perineum off your mat, even though you're not squeezing any large muscles. It's very subtle. Good, and you could do it with the legs or without, right? Inhale, internally rotate. Exhale, externally rotate. Beautiful. Then we're going to pause and rest for a few moments, and then we'll find ourselves coming onto hands and knees with a block for the next exercise. So the next step is to take one of our blocks and place it between our thighs, right about mid-thigh, between the knees and the hips. We're going to come to a tabletop position on our mat. You can be on your hands, but if it's more comfortable for your wrists, you can put your forearms on the ground instead. And we're going to do some cat and cow here with the block. So we're going to take that same breath that we were just doing and exaggerate it here. So as we inhale, we internally rotate the thighs. The feet may kind of open like so. And you want to think of spreading your sitting bones and pushing the block backwards toward the wall behind you. So this is the inhale, right? Happy cows. Let your belly drop, chest open, and feel the pelvic floor relax. The same breath that we did before. So we're going to add some more layers. It's a little bit more complex with what's going on in this position. And then exhale, squeeze in, round the back, angry cats. Externally rotate your thighs, and now take this block and push it forward towards your face, rounding chin to chest. Inhale, internally rotate, relax the floor of the pelvis, spread the buttocks. Exhale, externally rotate, pull the block in and lift up from the floor of the pelvis up through the crown of your head. Inhale, turn the thighs in, push the block back, spread the sitting bones. Exhale, externally rotate, pull the block forward, lift the sitting bones in and up, right from the center of the floor of your pelvis. So these larger movements are a little easier for us to kind of access those muscles. And yes, we're using the assistance of other larger muscles to do this, but when we do this in a lot of different positions, we start to become more aware of where our pelvic floor actually is. So we can take the same action and do it here in downward dog. Soften your knees so you can rotate in and out. Inhale, lift the sitting bones, lift the tailbone, relax the pelvic floor, lift the buttock. Exhale, externally rotate, chin into chest, pull the block forward. Inhale, so the thigh bones in the hip sockets are rolling in and out. Exhale, externally rotate. Now, it's not just about the legs, right? What we're doing at the same time here is relaxing the pelvic floor on the inhale and then lifting up, just like we did off of that blanket on the exhale. Now, we can do the same action in a forward fold as well. So we're going to come to sort of like a chair position. You can put your hands on your thighs. Same thing here. Inhale, internally rotate. Spread your sitting bones, lift your chest. Relax your pelvic floor. Exhale, externally rotate, curl in, lift up. I'll turn to face you so you can see what that looks like. Inhale, internally rotate. Exhale, externally rotate. Now, all the while, it's not so much about the thighs. This is just a tool to help us feel the relax and then feel the pelvic floor lift. Good, one more. You can do it standing too. Of course, my head's going to come out of the camera. So we'll come to standing next. So now that we're standing, we're going to take our block and place it on the floor and stand near a wall or something you can hold on to for safety. I'm going to not do as I say, not as I do, right? So we're putting the block on the floor. Coming to stand on top of the block, holding on with one hand. We're going to let this other leg hang down like so. And the key is not to bend the knees. This is going to be a pelvic movement. So as we inhale, let's take that outside hip and lift it up as high as we can, just tilting the pelvis to one side. And then exhale and drop that same hip down without bending your knees. So my pelvis is tilting to one side and the other side. As I turn sideways to show you this, it's important to remember that we want to keep our abdominal muscles engaged, right? So I don't want to arch my back. I want to pull my belly. I'm lifting straight up and dropping straight down. The standing leg, the one that's standing on the block, stays straight. And what's happening here as I'm doing this on the standing leg that's on the block is my gluteus medius muscle is shortening and lengthening. And this muscle on the outside of the hip is one of our primary balance muscles. When we have reduced balance, there are numerous studies that show that reduced balance capability equals reduced pelvic floor function and vice versa, right? So it's not just about the muscles at the bottom of the bowl of the pelvis, it's all the muscles around the hip that support. Now this muscle, we have gluteus maximus, medius, minimus. It fans from the outside of the thigh here out and up in a V shape toward the pelvis. So going straight up and down is good, but it's not going to get all the muscle fibers that we want. So we're going to make some circles too. So I'm going to take this hip of the leg that's hanging and I'm going to go forward and up, back and down. Big circles. And then reverse the other way. And you're probably going to start to feel really warm in that standing hip, the hip that's supporting you. Right, I like to call this leg the party leg. We'll switch sides while we're talking. The leg that's in the air doing its thing is the party leg. It gets to have a lot of fun, right? It looks pretty, it goes wherever it wants to go in our fancy balance poses. But if I don't have the support of the standing hip and leg, and I'm not really grounded in what's happening in this leg, I don't have a balance. It's a good life metaphor, right? Not just for balancing, but for the health and well-being of my entire functioning of my body, right? So I can work from an outward perspective and do a couple Kegels and squeeze really tight and say that my pelvic floor is getting work. But if I'm not really going deep into the subtler muscles, doing the hard work, doing the kind of boring work that doesn't look really fancy, then I don't have the whole picture, Little life lesson for you here. Sometimes this functional movement stuff is just not as important, if not more important, than the fancy other stuff we do on our mat, right? So maybe you're feeling a little warm around this area. Take a moment here just to kind of stretch out the hips. Maybe step the leg back of the hip that's kind of burning and push out into that gluteus medius muscle. And so now that we've worked the floor of the pelvis, we did a little internal, external rotation, we did a little of the outer hip, we're going to come into the muscles here too that also support the adduction, so the inner thigh. So we're going to come to lie on our mat next. So coming to lie down on our mat, now we're going to get deep inside all the stabilizers in the inner thigh and around the thigh bone. So you can take one leg up into the air like this, and this other leg can be bent on the floor, especially if it helps you contract your abdominal area and support your lower back. You can even drop it open to the side, right? So whatever you choose, whatever gives you more stability around the pelvis. You might even put your hands on your hips for added support here. So we have this leg straight up in the air, and if this gets tiresome, you can always opt to bend your knee and use your knee instead of your toe. But I'm going to come here with one leg straight on the ground, one leg straight in the air, pulling the belly button back into the floor. And again, returning to that same breath where I relax the pelvic floor on the inhale, contract on the exhale. Now, while this is happening, I'm going to start to make tiny circles with my whole femur, my whole thigh bone inside the hip socket. Really tiny. Now, what's important is that my pelvis is not moving at all. Isolate this movement deep inside the hip socket. What you will notice is the slower you go, the more you feel, right? The goal is not to go faster and use larger muscles and do more. It's actually to do much less to get to the tiny, subtler muscles inside our hips. And I'm going to take those circles and start to make wider circles. So I'm spiraling out little by little. And the wider I go, the slower I want to go, because it's going to get even more challenging here. Keep the belly in tight. Press that standing leg into the mat as wide as you can go without tipping over, without losing control of the pelvis, okay? Nice big even circles. And when you've gone as wide as you can, pause and reverse the spiral back in. So slowly back inward, starting wide, belly button in, make sure you're breathing. Spirals get smaller and smaller and smaller. All the stabilizers around the hip that work in that community of muscles to support the pelvic floor. So we're going to pause for a moment, give it a rest. And just notice any difference in this moment between the leg that you've just done the work with and the other leg. That's a gift too, that interoceptive awareness of the subtle changes you're creating in your practice. I hate rushing to do the other leg. I love pausing and noticing the difference, so I get better at noticing those subtle shifts in my own body. And then when you're ready, the other leg will come up. So again, I can do this with my bent knee and do circles with a bent knee. I want to keep the pelvis still, so no rocking side to side or tilting back and forth, right? It's really, really controlled. This leg can be straight, and so can this one. We're going to start with teeny tiny circles, opening this door, right? Opening circles with our toe in the air. Now this is coming from your thigh, deep in your hip socket. It's not an ankle movement. The whole leg is moving. And then as you circle, you're going to start to get wider. Keep the supporting leg powerful, pressing into the floor. Keep the belly pulling in toward the floor. Let those circles continue to get even wider. Nice and slow. Nice and slow. The wider you go, the more your pelvis is going to want to wobble around. So try to stay very in control here. You can use your hands a little, use your abdominal muscles, use your supporting leg. Slow and controlled.
I'm shaking, so if you are too, that's good. When you've gone as wide as you want to go, and you can do this for a long time, you can go longer if you want. But when you're ready, spiral back in, starting wide, go the other direction, slowly making your way back in to center. Take your time. And then when you've had quite enough of that, relax the leg, give them a little shake. Take a breath, hopefully feeling a lot more alive all the way around the pelvis. And then the last thing we're going to do is little reclined butterflies, I like to call them, right? So we're going to bring our feet onto the mat, knees bent, pointing up to the sky. And we're going to give a little squeeze to the thighs inward, and think of spreading your sitting bones like we did sitting on that blanket earlier. So inhale, the thighs come together, the pelvic floor relaxes, the sitting bones spread. And then exhale, turn out into Baddha Konasana. Think of the sitting bones coming in and up, pulling up in the pelvic floor to the crown of the head. So it's the same action we did at the beginning of our practice. Inhale, internally rotate. Exhale, externally rotate. But this is not just a thigh movement. We're not just opening and closing the thighs here. We're really bringing our awareness to the sitting bones, spreading and coming together, and really, most importantly, inside the pelvis, right at the base of the floor of the pelvis, that pulling up in the center of the perineum on the exhale. So when the legs open, that's when we lift up. And when the legs come together, that's when we relax. 2 more. Exhale, open, pull up through the floor of the pelvis. Inhale, together, relax. Last one. Notice how your abdominal muscles engage too here. And then when you're ready, we're going to let the knees fall open. You can use gravity to relax the legs toward the floor, or we can place some blocks underneath our thighs. And we're just going to spend a few moments here completely relaxed, right? We need a balance between effort and ease in our practice. Too much of anything is too much, even if it's a good thing. And so now we just relax the inner thighs, inner groin muscles, relax the pelvic floor. Just feel the breath coming in and out through the nose, the expansion of the belly as we rest here. And let those activities integrate into our body and our energetic body and our mind. A couple breaths here. And then when you're ready, coming out of this slowly, coming to a seat. Again, returning to that natural movement of the respiratory diaphragm and the pelvic floor. Inhale as they relax down. Exhale as they just naturally lift up softly on their own. And whether you're seeking out these types of exercises to rehabilitate from an injury or from giving birth, or you're looking to improve your balance, or really just find a way to be more multi-layered, multifaceted in your practice, I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope that you do integrate some or all of these into your daily life, into your yoga practice, If you're a teacher, folding them in for your students. And if you'd like more tutorials like this, more information on yoga therapy for physical and mental support, you can like it, subscribe, or you can visit my website, embodied.health. Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing from you and see how you like this practice. Have a wonderful day. Namaste.